From series staples like Ganon to one-off wonders like Majora, Zelda's final bosses are almost always incredible. Almost always. Finally coming face to face with the story's antagonist in a climactic showdown is a great way to test the player's skills, and often their proficiency with the game's main items too. The difficulty of these final bosses ranges. On one hand, some are painfully easy, completely deflating any tension built up for the fight, but on the other, some are genuinely incredibly difficult to beat, especially on your first attempt. So subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content, and let's run through my personal top 5 hardest final bosses. The original King of Demons, the author of all Hyrule's pain, the imprisoned Unleashed, Demise, is of course the final boss of Skyward Sword, The Legend of Zelda's origin story. Demise appeared, alongside an army of demons, from a mysterious rift in the ancient past, to claim the Triforce as his own. He was narrowly defeated by the goddess Hylia and an alliance of the various races of the world. But, with the help of his servant Girahim, he returns once more in a blazing fury. After Demise, as the imprisoned, is slain by a wish from the Triforce, Girahim isn't deterred. He takes Zelda through the Gate of Time to the distant past where his master still lives, and despite Link's attempts to stop him, completes the resurrection of the Demon King. With Demise reborn, only Link stands between him and complete dominion of the world. A single Hylian stands his ground and defies a dark god. Impressed with Link's courage, Demise arranges a duel for the fate of the world, retreating to a strange, otherworldly battleground. The fight against Demise is very simple. It's a straight sword fight. Link's Master Sword against Demise's massive, brutal blade. He's very quick, and it's difficult to land a hit on the demon, who'll retaliate with his own powerful swings or punches if Link overextends. If Link has completed Lanayru's lightning round and obtained the unbreakable Hylian shield, the fight is considerably easier, as Demise absolutely chews through lesser shields if Link misses a parry. After soaking up a considerable amount of hits, Demise finally falls. But he's not done yet. The sky erupts into a thunderstorm, and lightning strikes the demon's blade, charging it with electricity. While it's charged, Link can't clash with Demise without getting shocked. He needs to time his return strikes well while avoiding the boss's swings and ranged attacks. Of course, Link can fight back with his own skyward strikes, which can cancel out Demise's lightning or damage him outright. After a few hits, he'll fall again, and Link is prompted to end the fight with a fatal blow, which Demise will narrowly avoid. If struck down again, however, Link can finally end the battle, leaping into the air, channeling a lightning strike through the Master Sword, and burying the blade into the demon's chest. Demise is only truly difficult if the player is unprepared. With the Hylian shields, or even just with some potions, he can be beaten without too much difficulty. But in my opinion, he's still the most difficult 3D final boss in the series, with the possible exception of Majora without the Fierce Deity's mask. He hits very hard, and if you get too carried away, will retaliate with blows that deal a couple of hearts of damage at a time. Overall, while Demise isn't an insanely difficult boss, he's a step above other 3D boss fights like Ocarina of Time, The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and even Breath of the Wild, earning him a spot on this list. A Link to the Past's Ganon is, canonically, most likely the strongest iteration of the Demon King we've seen in the series. He's the result of an alternate universe in which Ganondorf won during Ocarina of Time, and his complete and utter domination of Hyrule was only stopped by a last-ditch effort of the sages to seal him in the Sacred Realm along with the entire Triforce. Fittingly, the final boss against Ganon in A Link to the Past is, without a doubt, the toughest solo Ganon fight in the series. A final duel against a fully powered King of Evil. After defeating Aghanim atop Ganon's tower, the wizard transforms into a bat and flees to the Pyramid of Power, crashing through the top. Link drops down into the chamber and comes face to face with Ganon himself, who admits that he's surprised by Link's strength, but that his quest ends here. With this, the fight begins. Ganon teleports around the room, spinning his trident at Link. It's easily avoided, and Link can damage Ganon with the Master Sword. After taking a few hits, Ganon adds a new attack. He'll summon a spinning ring of fire, which grows and then shrinks, before each fireball turns into a flaming bat and flies at Link. The bats are relatively hard to avoid and can deal substantial damage if a few of them connect. Ganon repeats this until he's taken a few more hits, when he'll leap into the air and come crashing down, causing the tiles on the edge of the arena to fall. In between jumps, he'll teleport around, this time summoning a large fire bat which moves in circles. Next, he'll introduce his secret technique of darkness, which amounts to sending a fire bat directly at Link while extinguishing the torches around the room. This renders him invisible, and the torches must be relit in order to see him, as he continues to teleport around. When Ganon takes some damage, he'll begin to flash blue for a second, signaling his vulnerability, and Link must hit him during this time with a silver arrow. 4 silver arrows will finally finish Ganon off, allowing Link to progress to the room with the Triforce. A Link to the Past's Ganon battle is relatively difficult, and if you're careless, you can take a huge amount of damage very quickly. You can also completely ruin the fight if you're as dumb as me, and you fall off the edge while trying to relight the torches, which drops you down to the bottom of the pyramid and completely resets the battle. It's definitely the most difficult solo Ganon fight in the series, but is nowhere near as difficult as the bosses later on this list. The Minish Cap isn't known for its difficulty. It's my absolute favourite 2D Zelda game, a charming, beautiful adventure with which my only real complaint is that I wish it was longer. But it's not difficult, and for the most part its bosses aren't either. The exception to this, in my opinion, is Vaati himself, a wizard who was once a Picori, now hell-bent on extracting the light force from Princess Zelda in order to ascend to godhood. Near the very top of the game's final dungeon, Dark Hyrule Castle, Link steps out onto a high bridge. Suddenly, Vaati's voice cuts through the room, mocking him, announcing that with 3 more chimes of the bell, his ceremony will be complete. Zelda will die, and the Wind Mage will become a god. This begins the game's final sequence. Link needs to reach Vaati in time to stop the ceremony before the 3rd bell tolls, or Hyrule falls. But he can't reach the sorcerer easily. He must fight his way there through a gauntlet of powerful enemies. First, Link takes on a ball and chain soldier fought on the narrow bridge. The first bell rings as he enters a room filled with Keaton, which can be defeated by power walking through the room alongside 3 clones. As he enters a small, empty chamber, the 2nd bell tolls, and Vaati summons 3 Dark Nuts, 2 red Dark Nut commanders, and 1 Black Knight, the most powerful class of the armoured foe. Unlike the previous 2, the 3rd chime of the bell is actually timed. Link has around 3 minutes to take on the Dark Nuts, and if he fails to do so, Vaati actually completes the ceremony, kills Zelda, and it's game over. It's not at all easy to take on 3 Dark Nuts at the same time. With 1, it's possible to run circles around the knight, waiting for it to swing and miss, then jump in and strike at it while it's vulnerable. But here, the group of 3 move around the room like a single unit, making it difficult to land any hits at all unless Link has the great spin attack or opts for sneakier tactics like using remote bombs. But with the Dark Nuts beaten, all that remains is Vaati himself. The final boss is fought in multiple phases. The first, Vaati Reborn, is fought in the same room as the Dark Nut battle. Vaati fights by spawning small eyes, which spin around him, occasionally stopping to shoot lasers. Vaati himself will occasionally spew out fire, and after taking a few hits, will cloak the smaller eyes in darkness, requiring Link to use the Gust Jar to be able to damage them. Once the eyes have been hit, Vaati becomes vulnerable, when he'll teleport around the room at high speed, making it difficult to land a hit on his weak spot. But a few cycles of destroying the smaller eyes and attacking the larger one will end this phase of battle without too much difficulty. Next, Vaati Transfigured. In case you didn't think the Vaati fight had used the classic Zelda weakness of eyes enough, this phase sees him transform into a single, giant eye surrounded by 8 smaller ones. To damage him, Link needs to shoot arrows at the smaller eyes, 4 of which will be invincible, with the other 4 opening to reveal weak spots once hit. He can then copy himself 3 times with the 4 sword and hit all weak eyes at the same time to deal damage. While Link is trying to reveal the weak eyes by landing hits with a bow, or trying to duplicate himself to attack, Vaati flies around the stage in circles, occasionally slamming into the ground to cause blocks to fall, spewing out purple hazards, or firing bolts of electricity, a hit from any of which will break Link's concentration and cancel his clones. This phase is more tedious than truly difficult. Vaati doesn't really directly attack you, he just mainly makes it difficult to line up the links with his weak spots. With Vaati transfigured down, the game pulls an Ocarina of Time, and gives us a false victory in the middle of the final boss. Link rescues Zelda, and the pair flee through Dark Hyrule Castle as it begins to collapse around them. With the main doorway blocked by rubble, Link and Zelda instead make for the Elemental Sanctuary, where they're stopped by Vaati. The Wind Mage, now in his final form known as Vaati's Wrath, teleports Link to a strange battlefield with a colourful, cosmic background. From the battlefield alone, it's obvious how to fight against this form. We're given tiles to copy Link, and a Minish portal to shrink down. Vaati, now a single floating eye accompanied by 2 arms, chases Link around the battlefield, firing balls of electricity and occasionally sticking his arm through the ground to slam down on the hero. This reveals his weakness. Link can disable the arms with the Cane of Paki, then shrink down and enter the disabled limb, destroying it from the inside by slaying the odd eye out. With both arms down, Vaati opens 4 smaller eyes, which must be damaged in a game of Dead Man's Volley. Link copies himself and bats back balls of magic at the wizard to stun it, and then moves in to damage it. This is easier said than done, as Vaati also releases volleys of electricity, which are difficult to avoid when cloned, but a few cycles of this will finally bring Vaati to an end. While there's no one singular part of the Vaati boss fight that stands out as overwhelmingly difficult, it's a massive step up in difficulty from any other boss in the game. I've always found the boss tough as it's a war of attrition. If Link fails at any point, even on the final fight against Vaati's Wrath, he has to restart the whole battle. All the way back at the fight on the bridge against the Ball and Chain Soldier, then the Keatons, the Dark Nuts, and Vaati's 3 forms. Overall, it's one of my favourite 2D boss battles. Except for Vaati Transfigured, which can just feel tedious, the showdown against the Wind Mage is a tough, satisfying end to one of the best games in the series. Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages are unique among Zelda games, in that they're essentially 2 halves of the same story. 2 standalone Zelda adventures that fit together to tell one tale. Each game technically has their own final boss, General Onox and Veran, but if both are beaten, it unlocks the game's joint, true final boss, a showdown to stop the sacrifice of Princess Zelda and the revival of Ganon. Once both Veran and Onox are beaten, Link finds himself in the Room of Rites, a strange maze-like chamber filled with statues with eyes. The path through the Room of Rites is simple enough. Whichever direction isn't being watched by any eye is the right way. After a few screens, Link finds his way out and reaches Zelda next to the flames of sorrow, destruction, and despair. Before she can be rescued, however, the witches Kotake and Koume appear, announcing that with the flames lit, the return of Ganon is imminent. They need only to sacrifice Zelda, and their plan will be complete. The first part of the Oracle game's joint final battle is against the 2 witches, who fly around a large empty chamber on their broomsticks, charging and throwing spheres of magic at Link. To damage them, Link needs to bounce back this energy at the opposing witch. Fire magic needs to be thrown back at the Ice Witch Kotake, and ice magic at the Fire Witch Koume. This is ridiculously difficult. The witches move around the screen very quickly, and most times that I land a hit on a witch, it feels more like a fluke than a good shot. You have to bounce the magic towards a spot where you think the right witch will fly to. Thankfully, the witches share 3 life points, and 3 successful hits will beat this stage. Refusing to fall like their generals, the witches unleash their true power. combining to form the single witch Twin Rover. Twin Rover essentially has two separate forms. A fire form, where she'll transform the room into a hazardous volcanic cavern and throw fireballs and flaming bats at Link, and an ice form, where she'll cover the floor in ice and attack Link with spiked rocks and sliding blocks. Regardless of her form, to beat the witch, Link needs to damage her with a sword, causing her to temporarily appear like her two halves are splitting apart. She's only vulnerable for a split second and needs to be hit with mystery seeds to damage her before she returns to either her ice or fire forms. A few seeds, however, will finally end the battle, and Twin Rover is defeated. But we're not done yet. In a last-ditch attempt to revive their master, Twin Rover instead sacrificed themselves in place of Zelda, completing the ritual and bringing the Demon King back from the dead. However, the botched resurrection ceremony means that he isn't quite the same. He's not the intelligent, cocky wizard fought in A Link to the Past, he's a mindless, raging beast. He'll teleport around the room, rematerializing to lunge at Link with one of a few attacks, like a great swing of his trident, slamming down on the floor to stun him, or even lighting up the room with blue magic, reversing your controls. To damage him, Link simply needs to hit him with the Master Sword repeatedly. As a standalone boss, Ganon is considerably easier here than he was in A Link to the Past, which fits, as he's not meant to be as powerful here. He's not been properly resurrected. But he's not the only final boss. He's fought only after beating Twin Rover, a long and difficult battle in itself. If at any point during the fight Link dies, against the Twin Witches, against Twin Rover, or against Ganon, he has to start again all the way back at the Room of Rites, and must complete the entire battle again, similar to Vati. Overall, it's a fun final boss, and as it takes place after completion of both Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, its difficulty makes it a great final challenge. With the sequel to the original Zelda, Adventure of Link, the developers drastically shifted the new series' direction. Now Link can explore the world from a bird's eye view only on what's effectively a map screen, with all of the game's dungeons, towns, and enemy encounters found in a flat side-scrolling space. Adventure of Link, as a whole, is notoriously difficult. Link can take huge amounts of damage from enemies and has to block incoming attacks precisely by crouching and jumping, counter-attacking to pick apart his foes. Even regular enemies can be unbelievably difficult, like the Fokar, armoured avian warriors who attack with quick, powerful blade beams. But nowhere are Link's abilities tested more than the game's two final battles. At the end of the Great Palace, a grueling dungeon by itself, Link encounters the Thunderbird, an artificial life form created by the King of Hyrule. It's the guardian of the Triforce of Courage, a strange, winged gargoyle-type figure which floats around the room spraying fireballs. Link begins the fight with significantly less magic than usual, because to be able to damage the Thunderbird at all, he needs to use the Thunder spell, leaving him with hardly any magic for the actual battle. Once thunderstruck, the boss is vulnerable to sword strikes, but only horizontal ones and only in his face. Link can't use the jump thrust or down thrust, he needs to stab the Thunderbird's head to deal damage. The more he does this, the faster it moves and the more fireballs it throws around the room. By the time the Thunderbird is down to its last few hit points, the rate of these fireballs is pretty insane, and its increasingly quick movement makes it hard to land a hit. One thing this fight does well is it does make you feel accomplished. It's helpful to buff Link up for the fight with various different spells you've acquired over the course of the game, increasing his defense with shield, increasing his agility with jump, and even allowing his shield to block the fireballs with reflect. That is, if you have any magic left after grinding through the Great Palace. The Thunderbird is still difficult. Even with reflect, Link isn't immune to the fireballs raining down directly on top of him, only those that hit his shield. But it's doable. With maybe a few attempts, it's not impossible to get past the Thunderbird, the guardian of the Triforce of Courage. But the game's not done yet. Link enters a chamber, empty save for an old man atop a stone column, hunched next to the Triforce of Courage. The man moves his staff before vanishing into the background, and the room lights up. Suddenly, something moves from behind Link. His own shadow leaps out and stands in front of him. The final battle isn't against another gargantuan beast, it's against yourself. Now, infamously, this boss can be cheesed. By crouching in the corner, it's possible to evade almost all of Dark Link's attacks, turning this into the easiest battle in the whole game. But I don't think this counts. Whether this method is intentional or not, it's clearly not how the fight's meant to play out. If fought properly, this boss is absolutely insane, and fittingly so for the final challenge of the hardest game in the series. Your shadow is incredibly quick and agile, evading your attacks with precise movements and striking back with quick blows. He can take 8 hits before he'll die, which doesn't seem like a lot, but actually landing those hits is ridiculously difficult. He's constantly leaping over you or out of your reach, and when he's at close range, he'll hide behind his shield. If Link tries to hold his ground against his shadow, Dark Link's attacks are almost impossible to fully avoid. He jabs quickly at different heights, so you have to move your shield to block them. Each time he hits you, it's a full point of damage, or half if you've got the shield magic active, which means it's not long until he's worn down your health entirely. The only way I've found that I can reliably beat him is by jumping into him, which occasionally lands a blow over his shield, but it's still incredibly difficult. It's a shame that the fight is so easy to cheese, because this boss, when fought on even ground, is without a doubt the most difficult boss in the Zelda series in my opinion, and the fact that it immediately follows the Thunderbird just solidifies this. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like or subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.